Hi, this is Scott from Resilient Ecology Systems and Design. This is episode 1 of hopefully many episodes about permaculture and permaculture design in northern Arizona. I started Resilient Ecology Systems and Design to mainly accomplish several things. First is to show how we can take responsibility for a lot of the land resources that we have up here in northern Arizona, and how we can use a lot of permaculture principles to shape what's going on in the land so that it produces more for us and that it's also environmentally responsible at the same time. One of my goals is to encourage people to be more self-reliant, more community reliant, and also to be environmentally responsible on a budget up here in northern Arizona. I really think that there is a market for a lot of younger people my age who are looking at getting away from the rat race, who are looking at getting out of having the city life, going into the student loan cycle and just being indebted for their whole life to go to a job that they don't like, to pay for a house that they can't really enjoy, all just to make sure that they have status, that they're keeping up with the Joneses. And what I'm trying to provide up here through Resilient Ecology Systems and Design, my business, is a way for people to kind of explore an alternative to that, which would be living more closely to the land, living a bit more simply, and using natural systems that we can observe in nature to create a system that yields and that provides for as many of your needs as possible while requiring as little input of your labor and definitely as little chemical use as possible. So, having explained that, I get the question a lot of times, well, what is permaculture? What is this? Is this just another type of landscaping where maybe they mix up the ratio of trees to shrubs? Well, no, permaculture is a little bit more than that. It's actually quite a bit more than that. Permaculture at its core is more of a philosophy. It has a prime directive in permaculture, which is to take responsibility for ourselves and for our children. And that's a good thing, and it seems pretty common sense, but when we think about it, how often do we go about our day-to-day lives, or really designing landscapes, designing anything, from that core ethic of we need to take responsibility, and what it is that we choose to do will have ramifications, both for ourselves and for the earth. So moving on from that prime directive, we look at the 3 ethics of permaculture. And I don't want to get all pedantic or get too into the weeds with the philosophical stuff with permaculture, but it really does help in order to understand what permaculture is and what it could possibly do. The 3 ethics of permaculture are care of the earth, care of people, and return of surplus. The care of the earth is pretty common sense. This is our home. You don't want to live in a dump, so you take care of it. The second core ethic, care of people, is designing our systems in such a way to where we seek to benefit people as well as the earth. It's not an either-or choice in permaculture. It's a take care of the earth and take care of people. And that's what we should be striving to do in our designs. In the third core ethic is return of surplus. And the third core ethic has a little bit of disagreement as far as how people like to phrase it. Sometimes it's return of surplus, sometimes it's fair share, sometimes it's consumption ethic, I've heard. But really at its core what it is it's the way that we visualize our inputs and our outputs in a system, is that we cannot just continually consume to the point of exhausting resources, and we can't just output waste until we end up living in a dump. It's the way that we conceptualize that, the outputs of a system to make them waste, which is also a bit different. Permaculture encourages people to look at the output of a system as potentially the input for another system. So, what does that mean in actuality? Well, let's look at food scraps. You eat, you throw away your, let's just say, organic vegetable material, and that becomes a waste product that for a lot of Americans just goes to a landfill, goes with a lot of plastics, a lot of different things that aren't really as compostable, but they go into a landfill, and over time they will slowly decompose, but that soil will have a lot of toxins from all the things that we're decomposing there. Whereas the permaculture alternative would be to take those food scraps and you could put them into either a worm composting system or give them to chickens or give them to some animal that's going to peck through, that's going to get nutrients out of those food scraps that maybe we as humans don't want to eat. And then they create a more readily usable form of animal waste that we can then compost again on our property. And once that turns into nicely composted waste, we can use that to put back into our gardens to nourish the food that we're growing again. So it becomes a philosophy of cycles. It becomes a philosophy of looking at things and trying to minimize the waste products. So that's the third ethic, talking about return of surplus, fair share. It gets into all of these things, and there's several different ways that you may hear it said. So why is it that permaculture is a good design system, or why permaculture in northern Arizona? Well, I can speak to the reasons that I got into it. First off is an interest in self-reliance. After my last job, I was interested in doing something where, hopefully I could just not be in a city and rely as little as possible on other people for what I need. Over time that's kind of changed, and I've begun to see that, there are possibly some unfavorable aspects of that attitude. But, self-reliance is something that's really good about permaculture, and that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be out living in the middle of the desert and with a steel bunker ready for the end of the world. If that's what you want, that's cool. If not, even just being more self-reliant in our community, having our local communities provide for a greater proportion of our food needs, so that here in Arizona we're not trucking in everything from California that we eat. And who knows what happens in the interim time. And that entire shipping network is not very environmentally responsible, and we end up living with the negative ramifications of that through decreased air quality and so on and so forth. But going on to the second reason for why I got into this was environmental stewardship. I've lived in some pretty nasty places as far as air quality, and you can believe what it is that you want to believe at the end of the day about warming trends or man's role in that. But the truth is that we do have the potential, and we have degraded the environment in several ways with more than just carbon or CO2. If you want to really take responsibility for what you're doing, you have to look at how it is that we put heavy metals into the air, how it is that we put heavy metals into our environment, or the impact of glyphosate on our food, or the impact of any other environmental toxin that we just spray really without thinking about the ramifications on the earth. So permaculture is a more responsible way to look at that, to look at all the interactions, or to look at as many of the interactions as we can understand in the system in order to get a better idea for how it is that we should move forward. And really the third reason that I got into permaculture, which plays in with the first two, is better mental and physical health. If you're outside, if you're interacting with the environment, if you're looking at natural systems, that's really the way that God designed us to be, is to be out, to be taking care of his creation. And permaculture gets us back into that. Permaculture gets us back outside. It gets us back to observing the natural systems and observing natural interactions of what happens. And, that's a good thing for our mental and physical health, way better than sitting in front of a computer screen, and way better than working at an office 12 hours a day, which I've done before. So, in summary, what I hope to accomplish here with resilient ecology systems and design in Flagstaff is to show that up here in Flagstaff we have, a unique climate. We're high, we're fairly dry, we have a lot of winds, we have sometimes huge temperature shifts in the middle of May. Here we got a pretty significant snow in May after having a pretty warm period for a week before. So learning how to deal with that in the permaculture way, and to provide for more of our needs, to provide for more of our food, while at the same time being environmentally responsible, I think has huge potential in Flagstaff. It's just a matter of exploring how to do it. So in future episodes, we'll be looking at ways to how to, get down into the dirt and how to actually make things work in Flagstaff, which can be a somewhat challenging climate for that.